A pleasant afternoon to each and everyone. Today is our first lesson in purposive communication. And tonight, we will discuss about communication process, principles, and ethics. So the objective or the unit objective of this session is to describe the nature, elements, and nonverbal communication in various multicultural contexts. Specifically, we will be trying to achieve how to describe the meaning, nature, and importance of communication, also to demonstrate the elements and processes of communication, and to describe the principles and ethics of communication. Okay? So when we talk about communication process, communication or the nature of communication as well, or the principles and also ethics, what comes to your mind when you hear communication process, communication principles, and communication ethics? Can you give me a specific situation where, or probably an idea, a statement that can directly connect with a communication process, communication principles, and communication ethics? Can you write one thing or something in the chat box that we have to consider when we communicate?
Sir,
Can we write it in the chat box? Yes, Kyla.
communication,
What
sir.
do we consider? Yeah, what do we consider? This is the question. What do we consider when we are engaging in, in communication, when we engage in the process of communication?
Sir, good afternoon. We are engaged in process of communication through building relationship with each other and exchanging ideas and information.
Okay, thank you so much, Kyla. That's a very good answer. So, of course, one thing is that we exchange information. That is true. According to Vian Grace Dagia, communication process involves a sender and a receiver. Okay, that is so true. But before we communicate, what do you think should we bear in mind? What is important in communication? Because, of course, our goal in communication is to be able to transfer the message effectively to the person whom we are communicating to. So for us to be able to do that, what should be our considerations? According to Cybele, Wayne, one thing to consider in communication is educational level. That's so true. That is why we also, determine the kind of language we are using depending on the kind of person we are also dealing with. So there is that kind of leveling or making everything suitable for our listeners. Thank you so much. I'll be showing you here a couple of illustrations, and what you are going to do is to describe the illustration based on your understanding of her or her nonverbal gestures, okay, or gestures, nonverbal cues, okay. Okay, we have this picture. Okay, or we have here 3 or 4 4 persons in the picture. I'd like you to describe each person. Okay, let's begin with the person on the extreme left. Okay, so let's start from left to right. So the first person, the second, third, and then fourth, starting from the left. Any idea that you can share regarding the gesture or the hand gesture of the person on the left? What kind of person do you think this person is based on his gesture? Anyone? Okay, Jenny Rose.
Ng non-verbal communication, sir.
Can you describe that person? What kind of personality characteristic do you think this person has based on his, nonverbal cue, or, based on the gesture that he's making here? Can you describe the person?
No, sir.
Okay, but what kind of person do you think he is? Is he kind? Is he, just give me an adjective that would describe the person. Generous? Any adjective? Okay, next to answer would be Francesca.
Good evening, sir. I think, sir, this person is imposing something that he is very sure of, something that he is trying to convey.
Okay, so it shows confidence, right? I'm sure of doing this, like doing this. Okay, so you're saying that the person is confident about what he's saying, that he maybe is certain of every word that he's saying. Okay, that's a good guess. Okay, let's proceed to the second picture. You know, the second picture from the left. Anyone? There is no, there is no wrong answer here. All your answers would be correct because you are just making your own conjecture. It's not actually a conjecture, but actually an intelligent guess because we have already the clue here. The clue is the person's gesture. So from that gesture, we will make an inference. What kind of person do you think he or she is based on the hand gesture that he is showing? Anyone? The second picture? Okay, you can type in the chat box if you don't want to say something. Okay, we have Jenny Rose and Angelica. So let's start with Jenny Rose. Okay, I can't hear you. So what about Angelica and then Prezil? Angelica?
She's relaxing, sir.
Okay, so the person looks relaxed. Okay. What about Prezil?
Sir, I think that person is a professional.
Okay, a professional. So if you're a professional, you're doing this. Why do you think a professional does this? You know?
Guess lang, sir.
Okay, it's just a guess. Okay, nice guess. According to Abigail, it's relaxed. So the person is sort of relaxing. Okay. Wow. You have good guesses. Let's proceed to the third picture. Of course, from the left, the lady with the big bun. Okay. So let's have Laika.
I guess the lady in the third picture, sir, is confused. Or, I mean,
Okay.
she doesn't understand what the other person is trying to tell her.
Okay. So maybe we can like a shrugging, right, of the shoulders. So you're saying that because of that, she may be confused of something that the other person has said. Okay, that's a good guess. What about we have one I forgot the first name, but okay, Hitalia. What's the first name of Hitalia? You are acknowledged, and then
Sam, sir.
okay, Sam, go ahead.
I think she is being carefree. She doesn't know what to say or what to do. So, to the person that she's talking to, she's just gesturing that action.
Okay, so maybe she doesn't know anything, or she's not sure, certain of something. So this gesture can mean that you are uncertain, you are not sure of something. Thank you. And finally, the last picture. May I ask Alexandra for the last picture?
I think, sir, she's trying to get something.
Trying to get something, but in
Something
terms, but not something that an object. Are you saying that he's trying to get something like an object or a thing?
I think he's trying to get a pencil, sir, in the table.
Okay. But in terms of behavior, when you do this kind of, action or gesture, what kind of person do you think, we can say about the person? Sam?
I think, sir, he is strong. He's telling the person to chill or to calm down.
Okay. So it's showing strength. Okay. Or trying to calm down someone. Okay, that's great. Great answer. Actually, from Audrey, I think Audrey here is referring her answer to the third picture. And she said, I guess he's a teacher. He's teaching shapes. Okay. Wow, you have really interesting guesses. Actually, it's nice that you're able to come up with your own intelligent guesses, knowing that we have already clues here. They're hand gestures. And hand gestures can really tell our personality, the kind of person we are based on our hand gestures. And sometimes you might be unaware that we have a lot of mannerisms, right? And sometimes that mannerism also will tell us the kind of person we are. Let's take a look at the answer here. The first person actually is showing confidence. So you are right. I think the first person who said that he's certain of something, is really sure of something, that's a sign of confidence. Because when you are confident on what you are saying, it would also reflect on the kind of hand gesture that you are showing. So this kind of hand gesture, when you are doing this, it could be confidence. The second one is relaxed. Wow, you hit it when you said that he's relaxed because he's doing this. Okay. It could be that he's thinking of something while relaxing. Have you noticed that we are in when you are on a deep thought? Sometimes you do this, right? When you are on a deep thought. But definitely he's relaxing. Maybe he's just in his home or maybe in his office, but his office is located on the 5th floor or the 10th floor of the building and it's looking through the window. So maybe you can do this. It's a kind of relaxing gesture. The third picture is described here as trustworthy. When you're a trustworthy person, you always have, like, when you're talking to someone, for example, you say, welcome to the group, right? So it's a sign of trust and you are also welcoming someone. So it could be that kind of person. And the last one is strength. Okay, so you got it right. When you are trying to calm down someone, you do this kind of hand gesture. Calma, calma, right? We're doing this. Calm down, calm down. We are doing this. So this is a general kind of, what do you call this? A general gesture that probably all people across the globe are using, considering that this kind of gesture or nonverbal cue or nonverbal form of communication, these gestures that you're seeing now are actually common in most people. But there are some probably which are used in a different context, in a different country. And that is something that is also interesting because, you know, I've spoken with Japanese people and even Koreans. When you are like asking them and they want to make sure that you're talking to them, they would point their face like this. Me? Are you talking to me? But in the Philippines, we don't do that. We don't point at our nose when we are referring it to ourselves, right? So if you want to probably ensure or if you want to confirm if the person is referring it to you, we don't do this, like pointing at our nose. Probably we would, you know, use our hand and put it in our chest, like, you're talking to me? Something like that. So maybe there are also some hand gestures which are used exclusively to a certain group of person, but generally there are some verbal cues that we are using that are common also to all types of people across the globe. So thank you so much for your responses. Now let's begin with understanding the process as well as the principles and ethics of communication by first looking into some principles of communication. When we talk about communication, it's a process of transmitting or conveying information to others. So that is so true because the goal of communication is to be able to communicate your thought, your idea, whatever it is, to someone. And if that happens, you're successful in communicating your idea. And our medium, of course, it could be words. It could also be hand gestures. And if that person understands you, then it simply means that, perfect, your communication is understood. Second is a system for transmitting or exchanging information, such as telephones, computers, and other digital data or gadgets. Right now, I think because of the advent of technology, many people engage in online communication or mobile communication than face-to-face communication. Have you noticed that? In your house, have you noticed that sometimes, even if you are watching TV, some of you are busy with their phones? Or I have seen this picture on Facebook that people were actually in the dining room, but all of them, each of them had a gadget and they were busy with their gadget. So it means to say that there is no more real communication happening. Why? Because they're busy with their telephones, with their computers. But of course, this can also be very effective tool, especially for long distance communication. Right now, we are communicating with people outside our country. So because also of the um, the growth of like the IPO type of business. So we have call centers here in the Philippines, teachers in the call center, or not teachers, but actually agents are actually serving clients from abroad, right? So, and the medium that we are using to communicate is through the use of technology. So that alone is a really great example of how technology connects people from around the world, and how outsourcing of companies happens because of technology. And that makes also some companies, or most companies, if not all, expand their business because of the use of technology. And that is the power of communication, making use of these materials or these equipment. It is an act or process of using work, success, signs, or behaviors to express or exchange information, or to express ideas, thoughts, feelings, etc. In communication, it's not just the idea that we are exchanging. We also exchange our thoughts and even our feelings, right? When you are sad, you would see the person's head that is down the whole time, right? It could be sad or down or problematic. And you understand that the person has already the problem. So there is something amiss with that person if you see him like that. So if you are able to identify the emotion or the feeling of the person by just looking at his gesture or nonverbal cue, that is already, successful communication. So sometimes we just don't want to be in the crowd, so we are trying to avoid the crowd. So maybe you have something in you, you are shy, you are embarrassed, or maybe you have problems, or there could be other reasons. And if you are studying communication and you see that there's something wrong with that person, that is very important in communication. So that is the nonverbal cue. Sometimes they would call it like, oh, there's a red flag, no? If there is something wrong already, just looking into signs. So it's very important that we are very critical, and at the same time, we are observant of what's happening around. Because communication is not just about verbal. It could be the signs that we are seeing around us. It could be the heavy clouds, or probably, that's about to, there's this dark clouds that you might think it would rain probably in the next few minutes, for example. So that can be considered as communication as well. So understanding what's happening around. A message that is given to someone, such as letter, telephone call. So I don't know if you have experience sending letters or receiving letters, but it's interesting because Japan is a very it's a very industrialized country. It's an advanced country. It's an industrialized country. But despite their being technologically advanced, every year they are sending cards to someone. To their colleagues, to their classmates. That card is called Nengajo. Nengajo is a kind of New Year card that is sent to someone to greet that person a Happy New Year, and also stating there the kind of updates about yourself. So they do that every year. It's so amazing. It's part of their culture. But in the Philippines, we don't do that anymore. We send messages, greetings through mobile devices, right? Or maybe many of us just send messages through Messenger. So although still, I consider it an effective tool for communication, but sometimes it lacks not only substance, but also it lacks feelings, right? I would still prefer if someone would greet me happy birthday. I would be very happy if that person would send me kind of, maybe like a message on mobile device, or probably a card. So that would be still more personal. So in other countries, they still practice that, despite the the advancement in technology, they continue to adapt such kind of practices. And to me, it's really good because if you want to establish relationship, communication is about relationship. And when we establish relationship, we want to make it personal because with personal touch, relationship becomes stronger, becomes more genuine, and becomes more authentic. That is why we have to really exert an effort, especially during this time, how to get in touch with someone so that we would be able to establish that relationship that we want to nurture with a person. It's a way of sending information to people by using technology. So radio, wireless, or electronic communication. So that's very prevalent nowadays, considering that technology has a huge part in our daily lives. Have you noticed that without your phone in your side, it seems that your day wouldn't be complete? Because I don't know, even I myself, every time I leave my phone or I left my phone in my house, I would really come back here. Even if I'm already in the middle of my travel, I would really have to come back because my phone is a very important device for me. And I think it also is to you. So that's something that has changed probably the way of life that we had before and the life that we have now because of this technological advancement. When you say communication, it's an intercourse by words, letters, symbols, or messages, and it's a way that one organization members share meaning and understanding with one another. Okay, so I know that every organization has its own way of communicating to their employees, communicating to their students with the proliferation of emojis. Alam po ba natin yung emojis, no? Emojis, emotion, and then G is a letter. Actually, it came from Japan. The first one, I guess, that discovered it, that the emoji created it, was a Japanese because the G is actually letter for Japanese. So emoji. So emo is emotions. It's a combination of emotion and letter. That is why now we would see emoji more effective in communicating, right? So like someone posted on Facebook and instead of putting a message there on the comment section, we would rather just click like, love, or I don't know what more emojis are available. Probably there are haha or whatever. Wow. So there are a lot of emojis that there are there. And probably that is also one way that we can effectively communicate, making use of these emojis. And to us Filipinos, sometimes emojis are not that meaningful, right? But to other countries, my goodness, emojis are everything. That is why in our case, it's just easy for us to click heart to someone's post, right? Without any special meaning. But to Koreans and to Japanese, when you put heart on a post, there is something else. So probably it's purely cultural, but sometimes I should say that we have to be very careful as well with the kind of emojis we are using, because for us, or maybe to us, there is no special meaning attached to that, but to others, there might be special meanings. That is why we have to be careful. Use the right emoji on the right time, on the right person, and on the right post, because it can really affect the meaning that you are trying to put across if you mismatch, or if you sort of messed up with emojis. So that's something also that we have to be very careful about from now on, understanding the consequences of the actions that we are making. Even with punctuation marks, because nowadays I've noticed that even students, they put a lot of question marks. For example, they would ask you, why is it that I am not receiving any modules? And then they would put a lot of question mark. Don't you know that that is kind of, exaggerated feeling? And if the person is not close to you, it might have a negative impact on that person. So that is why if you use question mark or, punctuation mark or exclamation point, please use exclamation point only once. If you put a lot of exclamation points, that's too much to bear already. If you are angry, that's being angry at the, I don't know, power of 100, to the power of 100. I don't know. So, which is why it's very important that we have to, always reflect on ourselves before we send a message. Make sure that the message you are sending is the message, or is the message that you want to be received by the person. We have to be candid, or to be clear with what kind of information we are sharing, especially on Messenger, because Messenger does not have emotions. You can just see their words. And sometimes words, letters, and symbols depend, the interpretation of words, letters, and symbols sometimes depend on the sender, and also depends it depends on the receiver. So sometimes it's so hard to meet halfway, especially when we are not talking directly. That is why if we have very important information to share, I'd rather call a colleague and talk about it rather than exchanging messages on Messenger, to make sure that the message did get across. It is an exchange of facts, ideas, opinions, or emotions by two or more persons. So when you talk about emotions, sometimes have you noticed that if you are visiting a bereaved family, sometimes it's better not to talk, because some people just get consoled and condoled without being, too talkative. Sometimes, it's fine. Sometimes there are some people who would rather see someone showing sympathy to them by just looking sad at someone's misfortune, or probably just, tap someone's back, or or maybe hug someone. So these are ways on how we can communicate our sympathy to someone, especially that emotions sometimes are very difficult to appease, especially if someone is mad or really, really sad, or devastated because his girlfriend broke up with him, for example, and is so devastated. So, emotions sometimes can be very, very hard to deal with. So we have to be careful with that as well. So it's a sum of all things a person does when he wants to create understanding in the minds of another. So that's communication. So it's a really powerful tool. Now let's take a look at components of communication process. You know what? These components are very important in understanding about communication, because through the components, or through your understanding of the components of communication, you would be able to see the importance of every component in a successful delivery of message. So the first component is the source, and that source is, it could be an article, it could be the person, it could be on television. So depending on the media that you get this particular message. So have you noticed that the best communicator would always check the source? For example, you heard that there's no class on Monday, and you're clueless about that, but someone did tell you that there's no class on Monday. So you would still verify the source. Where did you get this? Who told you this? Okay, so the source is very important. Knowing the source is very important in communication. So the source is the sender who carefully crafts the message. Your goal in communication is always to make others understand, not to impress someone. If your goal of communicating or in communicating is to impress someone with your highfalutin words, flowery words, then you are not communicating to the person. You are just, showing up. But if your purpose is to make the person understand, then you will make use of simple words, simple phrases, illustrations, hand gestures, so that the person will understand you. Sending maybe anyone, an author of a book, a public speaker in a special occasion, or even a traffic enforcer. So anyone who's sending a message. If the traffic enforcer does this, it means that you have to stop, right? So these are important nonverbal communication cues or nonverbal cues that we have to consider, especially when we are driving. Traffic signs, like the different colors of the traffic lights. So even if there is no one there telling you to stop, if the light is red, you're automatically going to stop the car. So these are, symbols or signs that we are also looking around us, or we are looking or considering whenever we are faced with this kind of situation. The second component of communication that we have to consider is message. So the message is the reason behind any interaction. We don't interact with someone without any reason. Tama po ba, no? We don't interact. It's crazy to talk to someone without any reason, just for the sake of I'm bored. Even if you're bored, you would still say, oh, I'm bored. So I'm communicating because I'm bored. So that is still a reason. You might say, oh, I don't have any reason why I come here. I just want to see you. But that is a reason, right? So, which means that any interaction that we are making, though it's verbal or non-verbal, the reason behind it is the message that you want to deliver. It is the meaning shared between the sender and the receiver, right? So have you noticed that when we do this in the Philippines, it means money, right? But I asked a Japanese friend, how do you interpret this? And the Japanese friend of mine said, it's okay. So which means that there are some nonverbal cues which are not universal, or probably it's very interesting because when I was in Japan, I was asked to count numbers using my fingers. And I said, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's very interesting. They laughed at me because in Japan, the Japanese people count the numbers in a different way. So it's like this: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So they do a different one. And then 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then 11. So they would like do this, like the opposite. So it's so interesting that we have different hand gestures when it comes to counting numbers. That's why it's very important to know that every country has its own culture, right? And because of that culture, we would be able to understand that though we interpret the message in a different way, for us to be able to interpret the message, even though we speak English here, but our English may be a variation of the many Englishes all over the world. There's a Filipino English, Singapore English. So there are a lot of Englishes around the world. And our goal here is to try to neutralize our English so that we would be able to understand also others. However, the best way for us to understand the message is actually to learn someone's culture. Because, every culture is unique. And the uniqueness in culture affects the way we interpret messages. So that's why it's very important to know the culture of a certain place. And that is also the best way to study a language, actually, to understand the culture. Because through it, you would be able to use the language effectively based on how it is used in that particular culture. Now, messages can be a form of poems, songs, essays, news articles, road signs, and even symbols, as I mentioned earlier. So have you noticed that during the time of the Spanish colonization, we had a lot of songs, actually. Most of these songs were very upbeat. Leron, leron senta, buko ng papaya. So these songs are really upbeat. But if you look deeply into the lyrics of the song, you would be able to see that there's something else in the message. I mean, there's something else in the song. It has a hidden message. Because as mentioned here, a message can be in a form of a song. And sometimes songs, not sometimes, but songs, poems, essays, and even articles differ, from period to period. Okay, from era to era. Why? Because of the different circumstances, the different situations that we are encountering. Because those poems, songs, essays, and articles have hidden meanings in there, especially if you know the material is dealing with some social issues. So it's very interesting to study those things, and we can only probably interpret the right message if you use your critical thinking. That's why it's very important to know the real meaning or essence of that particular article, for instance. The next to consider is the channel. What is the medium that we are using? For example, now we don't have face-to-face learning. However, we have like the virtual engagement. So this is our channel. Sometimes there are a lot of interference in the channel, right? Especially if the connection isn't stable, student's connection isn't stable, or if there's brownout. You know, in other countries, they don't have brownout, especially in Japan, they don't have brownout. So they don't have any background about brownout. When I said, oh, I'm so sorry, I couldn't teach you tonight because there's a brownout in my area. And they would say, what's that? Because they don't know what brownout is. So that's very interesting. So channel is the means by which a message is conveyed. It could be a phone call, a notification, or a letter. It is the mode or the way that message is being delivered. It's the responsibility of both the sender and the receiver to choose the best channel for the interaction. That is why if you want your communication to be effective, you have to choose the right medium. Okay, it could be face-to-face, it could be virtual, it could be phone, it could be messenger. But if you are just like chatting with someone, like the usual chat, probably we can just do the messenger. But if you want to really discuss confidential matters with someone, then you can use a different medium. So messenger could be very unsafe for confidential information, especially that Facebook can be easily hacked. So in businesses, they are using different platforms. So, which means that channel is always considered when we are communicating to ensure that communication will succeed. Also, we look into the receiver. Receiver is the person who receives the transmitted message. Maybe part of an audience in a public speaking event, a reader of a letter, or a driver who reads road signs. Expected to listen carefully, jot down information, and ask for clarification. So which means that both the sender and the receiver have equal accountabilities. If you want your message to be understood by the receiver, you have to make it clear. You have to choose the right channel. However, for the receiver to also understand the message that is being conveyed by the speaker or by the source or the person talking, he has to carefully listen and jot down information and ask for clarifications. That's why in this class, I require you to have an individual note, because your individual note would motivate you to listen carefully, to jot down important information, and to make clarifications. In that way, you would be able to ensure that you would be, you understand or you understood the statement at least, or the session at least 80% of the session. I think 80% would be enough for me already. Although I'm targeting for 100%, but 80% is already a good percentage for, especially for this kind of engagement. We are not face-to-face, but we are just doing the virtual lecture. And also I will be posting this on YouTube, of course. So that would be an additional, additional help, especially that you can review it many times. Now, the fifth component of communication is feedback. We're done with source, we're done with message, we also have the channel, we have the receiver. Now we need to have a feedback. What is the purpose of the feedback? It's essential to confirm recipient understanding, expressed in various forms, like a simple nod. So I remember that there was a school I visited in Japan, that instead of giving a 4-item test, the usual thing we do in the Philippines, at the end of the class or at the end of the lesson, the teacher would just ask, how many of you understood the lesson? And the students would just raise their hand. So a simple nod is actually a manifestation that someone understood. It's a feedback already that the receiver is giving to the sender, to the source, to ensure that, or to probably to confirm his understanding of the communication. It could be written, spoken, or acted out. So some people are very shy, probably reserved, like the introverts. Maybe they don't show their disagreements through words, but they can do it through writing. So probably like, okay, if you cannot express yourself orally, please write your answers in the chat box. Or some people would show their disagreement on their faces. That is why in communication, we have to read, we have to learn how to read facial expressions and hand gestures, because these are clues, non-verbal cues that can give us, you know, sort of feedback from the person we are talking to, especially when we are trying to gather, you know, feedback, whether or not the person has understood the message that we are conveying. So, which is why it's very important to ask, do you have any questions? Or can you write some questions? It's very important in communication, especially for teachers. It's very important. But of course, for you, because when you become professionals one day and you will be working in an organization, in a hospital or in a clinic or in a pharmacy, of course, asking for feedback is very important, right? To confirm. That's one way of ensuring that your instructions are being understood by someone to avoid mistakes. And I think it's very important in communication, especially when we are working already, to ensure that excellence is achieved in everything that we do. It's to get a feedback. So feedback is very important. The sixth component is environment. The place, the feeling, the mood, the mindset, and the condition of both sender and receiver. Okay, it's very important, the place. You want to bring, or you want to propose to your girlfriend, for example. Would you bring your girlfriend to a noisy place? It's a different thing, right? Because you're trying to be romantic. So you have to go somewhere that is quiet, you know, that you can probably be heard by your girlfriend, not be misinterpreted with your actions. So that kind of thing is very important. The feeling, okay? I think I mentioned it before that never decide when you are too happy or too angry, because your decision would definitely be different from when you are sober, or from when you are sober, you are not in euphoria or something. Also your mood, right? And the mindset. So it's very important that you are kind of on the same boat, okay, so to speak. May involve the physical setup of a location where communication takes place, space occupied by both the sender and the receiver, including the objects surrounding the sender and the receiver. So that's why if you want to have a casual conversation, then you can just bring someone in just a cafeteria. Probably that would be fine for casual conversation. But if you want to like engage in business transactions with someone, then you have to bring someone to a restaurant. That's very important, right? Or as I mentioned earlier, if you want to propose to a girlfriend something, so you have, to someone, you can bring that person to a romantic place, right? So, which means that the environment also plays a vital role in a successful communication. Of course, definitely distractions or places with a lot of distractions are not a perfect place for good communication. Have you noticed that when you are in the disco, for example, you're dancing. So normally when you're talking to someone, you're shouting and you kind of get closer to the person's face just to communicate, right? So the environment itself affects communication. That is why it's very important to really consider it. To include this as the considerations in your considerations in preparing for a successful communication, since it's one of the components of communication. Seventh is the context. What is the context? It involves the expectations of a sender and a receiver and a common or shared understanding through environmental signal. So when you talk about context, it's very important that the sender and the receiver have common or shared understanding about something. For example, if I would send you congratulations, probably you would say, what is Sir Esparar congratulating me for? Right? It's because you don't have the context of what I'm saying. Okay? But if you joined in a competition and you won, and then I congratulated you, the word congratulations has a meaning to you. And that meaning is, the meaning, the message, or the meaning of the message, or the message itself that I'm sending to you is actually understood easily because you are actually on the same boat. You are on the same mindset. Okay? That is why context is very important. Sabi nga nila, wag paasa. So context is very important in communication. That is why if you want that person not to expect too much, do not show some false anong tawag doon? False expectations or false signals, mga ganun na. Confusing signals. So that's one thing that we have to consider also in communication. And the last one is interference. This is the eighth component of communication, interference. When you talk about interference, it's a barrier or block that prevents effective communication to take place. I mentioned earlier that there are a lot of distractions that can affect the environment, and these are the interference. And interference has different kinds. So we have one is the psychological barriers. These are the thoughts that hamper the message to be interpreted correctly by the receiver. Have you noticed that when you are skeptical of that person, when he says something to you, you tend to not believe the person, to doubt the person. Why? Because you have already doubts on him prior to his communication to you. So that affects actually communication. So another one is physical barriers. This includes competing stimulus, weather and climate, health, and ignorance of the media. So physical barriers, so competing stimulus. So you are here, and then I'm talking to you, and then probably, there's a noise that you can hear from the environment. It could be weather. It's raining heavily, and the rain is so loud that we cannot hear each other anymore. Okay? Or health and ignorance of the medium. It could be ignorance of the medium. It means to say you don't know the language, for example. Okay, so that's one thing as well. Okay, physical, so health, your personal health, especially when you are not in good condition. Okay, and the third is linguistic and cultural barriers pertain to the language and its cultural environment. I mentioned earlier that this one is money for the Filipinos, but this is okay for the Japanese. So we have different symbols. So that's cultural in nature. And it's so hard to interpret, someone's actions, especially if we do not understand the culture of the person. That is why it's very important to know that, because it's very crucial in a successful communication. Okay? Even though with the hand gestures, when you are shaking hands with someone, so there are some countries that they would squeeze your hand. Probably it would be misinterpreted by someone as a different, or that has a different meaning. Okay, in other countries, so even the tightness of your grip when you when you handshake, right? When you are shaking hands with someone. Linguistic, definitely. So of course, we're not Americans. We speak English, yes. Maybe many of us are fluent in English, yes. But when we go to America, there are words that they speak that they may use in a different way. So that's what you call slang. They have a lot of slang terms, or slang words. So that's why it's very important also to, again, to study the culture of a country, especially when you are communicating. This can be words. Yeah, it can mean in different cultures. Okay. Okay. And we have the fourth one, which is mechanical barriers, are those raised by the channels employed for interpersonal, group, or mass communication. So when talking about mechanical barriers, you're talking about cell phones, laptops, and other gadgets used in communication. So sometimes if your laptop is working very, very slowly, so that also hampers communication, right? If your cell phone is broken, that also hampers communication. Which means that mechanical barriers can affect communication. So it's very important to familiarize yourself with the platform that you are using, especially now that we are using virtual engagement most of the time. So you have to be aware, like how to share screens, how to behave when you are in an online platform. So these are things that we have to also consider when communicating. So that's the end of my presentation. Time check, it's 6:42 already. So actually, I'll be asking you to write your essential understanding on the lesson that we discussed today, on the what do you call this? On the, okay, let me just stop the recording.